Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I thought about mothers and Mother's Day, and I know that I've been accused of sometimes, probably most of the time, thinking like I act on my heart actions. Like I think with my heart, not often with my head. And sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that gets me in trouble. Is there anyone else that does that? Please tell me I'm not the only one. Okay, good. I think that that's one of the things that the music industry, like if you turn on the radio, isn't that what you hear about? You hear songs that just try to tug away at those heartstrings. Or you look at the movies that are on the big screen or even on the little screen and you watch them. Actually, the movies are not one thing that pull away at my heart. And since Ryan's not in here, I'll tell this story. He usually, at the end of a love story, he's very intrigued and he'll be watching it and then they'll do, like they have that moment where they hug or they kiss or whatever. And I'll go, bleh, look at that. And he'll say, you ruin it every single time. It's a nice little love moment and you ruin it. So you can tease him when he comes back in. But there are all things that pull at our heartstrings. And so today we're going to look at what happens when you have a hungry heart that is completely opened and transformed in an extraordinary way. And we're going to take a look at a woman whose name was Lydia. And it's in Acts 16 if you want to follow along as I try to pronounce these places correctly.
Just make it up.
I'll do my best. So to give you a little background of where we are when we open up Acts 16, Paul, and if you remember who Paul is, Paul was an apostle who was, before he was converted, was a guy who went out there and he killed Christians. He was so against Christians, he was so against Jesus, but then he met Jesus on the road to Damascus. Jesus opened his eyes and now he's telling people about Jesus and about the gospel and about the good news. And so this is his second missionary trip is where we're going to pick up. And it says that from Troas, we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace. And the next day on to Neapolis. From there, we traveled to Philippi, a Roman colony, the leading city of that district of Macedonia. And we stayed there several days. On the Sabbath, we went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message, and when she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. If you consider me a believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. And so Lydia was this affluent business woman. It says that she was a dealer in purple cloth. Now the purple cloth isn't like you could go to Joann Fabrics or to Walmart and buy this purple material. This purple material was made from oyster shells that had to be cracked open in a special way, and there was dye in it that they laid out on the cloth, and then it had to be laid in the sun and wait an appropriate amount of time. So this purple cloth was very, very expensive. And this was a woman who dealt in purple cloth. So she had a lot of money. She had a lot of influence. And she could have just thought, you know what? I've got enough. I've got enough in my business. I've got this cloth. I've got people underneath me. Money could be enough. Lydia could have said, you know what? I think money's enough for me. But instead, her hungry heart was out by the river, it says, out by the river praying with some women. Because she had a hungry heart that was just happened to be in the right place. Lydia could have decided that a general belief in God was enough. She could have just decided, I've had enough money, I've got a great business, I have this general belief in a God that I kind of know, and that's enough for me. But Lydia, that isn't what she thought. I don't know, maybe she had discovered that her money could buy her a house, but not a home. Or maybe she discovered that money can buy a clock, but it sure couldn't put any extra time into her day. Maybe she had bought a bed, but realized that she could buy a bed, but she couldn't buy sleep. That money could buy food, but not an appetite. It could buy position, but not respect. See, money can buy you medicine, but it can't buy you health. And it may be able to buy you people, but it can't buy you friends. Money can buy you religion, but it can't buy you salvation. It can definitely buy you a good life, but it sure doesn't buy you an eternal one. Money can buy you a crucifix, but not a savior. And it can buy you a passport to anywhere but to heaven. And I think that Lydia had discovered that. She had all the things that you could want, but yet her heart was still hungry. So there she was. She was out by the river. She was in this place, and her heart was just so hungry for God. And I don't know if she had heard about God in her hometown, that she had heard about the God of Israel, but she was out there and she was just praying and praying. In John, it says that a time will come, and now has come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. See, in this world today, we have this mantra of, you could talk to somebody and they say, well, I believe in God. But what God do they believe in? Do they believe in Jesus specifically, or are they just talking about some higher power that they've made up in their own mind? Because that just believing in a God is a stalled faith. There's nowhere to go with that. There's nowhere to be nurtured. There's nowhere to grow. And isn't that what a faith in Jesus does? A faith in Jesus transforms and changes who we are. And so there she is. She is just praying and praying. Her heart is hungry, and she is just, what is going to happen? I expect the unexpected. And so have you ever walked through these walls to our house of prayer? Right? This is where we meet up to pray together and expect the unexpected when you're here. Has anyone ever had that happen to them? I'm sure Raymond last night, when that girl said, I have sold everything. God told me to go, so I sold my house, I sold my car, I left my family, and I'm going to Haiti to tell people about the Jesus that transformed my heart. Because who else but Jesus would have you do that? You know, I can remember, actually, when I was preparing this a couple weeks ago, was right before the Easter egg hunt. And I thought, unexpected in church. You know, unexpected, yes, but unexpected people, unexpected. And I walk into the Easter egg hunt, and I meet Monica, who is from the inner city of Philadelphia. And she talks to me about community and what it means to have real relationships with not only people in a congregation, but people in your neighborhood, and to just live your life without any kind of smoke screens, you know, but to let people see who you truly are. So have you ever had God meet you in an unexpected way? Right here. Do you expect him to meet you? A hungry heart. So her heart's hungry, and she's there, and she's praying, and I don't even know what she was praying for. But it says that she, one of those listening, as Paul came in this place of prayer. And so Paul, if you know anything about Paul, when he would come into a city, the reason that he did not like people who followed Jesus is because he was a Pharisee. He was a Jewish leader in every respect. And they were the ones, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the people who had convicted Jesus and hung him on the cross. He was part of that group. And so for him to have his changed heart, he listened to everything that Jesus put on his heart. So there he was, and he had decided that he was going on this missionary journey to talk about his transformed heart. And he was sitting waiting to go, and he wanted to go to Asia. In Paul's mind, he thought, I want to go to Asia. That's where my next missionary trip is going to be. And as he went to set out, it says the Spirit of Jesus kept him out of Asia. And then he had this dream. He had this dream to go to Europe, that there was a man there, and a man says, come and help us. We need help here in his dream. And so Paul said, okay, I'm willing. My heart's willing. I'll go where you tell me to, Jesus. And so Paul was listening when he made that decision to walk into this city. And what Paul would do on his missionary trips, he would walk into the city and he would first go to the synagogues because he spoke their language, see, because he was one of them. So he would go there first and he would tell them, look, that Messiah that you've been waiting for, I met him. And let me tell you, he was Jesus Christ, and he would preach the gospel. But when he went into Philippi, there was no synagogue. Like, there was not enough believers in the God of Israel to even go into the synagogue. And so he went outside of the city, and there were the women praying by the river. And as he is there, he delivers this message. And like I said, most of his messages, if you read through Paul's, when he would go into the synagogue, he would give them this message of Jesus. So I don't know exactly what Paul said. I'm sure it was a great sermon that he gave these women, or a great talk, but Lydia heard. And maybe she heard about the God who does exactly what he promises, that he actually brought the Messiah that he had promised those people of Israel when he said, I'll bring you out of bondage. He didn't mean just out of Egypt. Or maybe she heard of the extremes that God will go to show his love to people. You know, that this Messiah came, that he was born in a manger. He was born in dirt, really, as this wonderful king was born in this lowly place. And he led this perfect life, and he was hung on the cross to show his love for you. Or maybe she heard this message of salvation, that there was deliverance from sin, that all those times that she put herself first, or that she thought that she knew her own way, that Jesus said, you know what, I'll die for that too. Or maybe she heard Paul talk about Jesus rising on the third day. And she thought, wow, this is the one I've been hungry for. This is the one, as I've been sitting here praying, this is the one that I want. This is the one that I've been waiting for. And she says, now I found him. But see, Lydia's heart was transformed when God opened her heart. It was the Lord that spoke her heart language. So I don't really know what the words that Paul said, but God used those words that Paul said to speak exactly into Lydia's heart. As he opened her heart, she was completely transformed. And so when's the last time that God opened your heart to a message? How does he speak to you? Does he speak to you in the music that you listen to? I know every time I hear the song Going Through the Motions, I think of Missy. Because she said when that song comes on, it puts her back into track, and she rethinks about her motives of what she's doing and how she's doing things. Or does the Lord open your heart when you open up his word and you read about forgiveness, and he speaks to you and you say, man, I gotta forgive that person that I've been holding a grudge against? Or do you hear him through your friends when they speak the word that you didn't even tell them you needed to hear, and they talk it to you? There was Brian and I watched this sermon by Andy Stanley, and I would recommend it to anyone who is married, dating, think you might want to at some point. But it's called Guardrails, and it talks about marriage and how most people in relationships think, well, if I give 50%, then you give 50%. Or it's a 70-30, and this is pull back and forth. But one of the things that Andy Stanley said was, that's not true. Every relationship will suffer if that's the way that you do your marriage or your life in this togetherness. He said, it says submit to your husband. It says serve your wife unto the Lord. And so if you love Jesus and your heart has been transformed by Jesus, then you serve your husband as you were serving me. You respect your wife as you're respecting me. And so every time he makes me mad, I close my eyes, and literally what I hear is Andy Stanley's voice say, "Do you love Jesus?" And I say, "Yes." And then I try to make sure that I follow through with that. But my heart was open to respond to that. And so a willing heart is an obedient heart. It says that Lydia, after she hears this message and God opens her heart and he speaks to her hungry heart, that the Lord opened her heart. She and the members of her household were baptized. They were baptized. And a baptism is that outward display of how her heart had been transformed. She wanted people to know, hey, look, I, this affluent businesswoman, who have everything that you could possibly imagine, I will be submerged in this water because my life has been transformed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And not only was her life changed, but it says that her entire household. Now that wouldn't just be like her and a couple people. She was an affluent businesswoman who would have had servants, whose servants would have had children. So this would have been like a small community in and of where she lived. And she had so much influence upon these people that her entire household decided to be baptized. And so how does that say for your life? Is your life such an influence that somebody looks at it and says, my gosh, I want that. I want that. And not only did she baptize, but she invited Paul and the other missionaries to come into her home. You know, Lydia's house became the first church plant there. The first church plant, all because her willing heart was obedient to what God spoke to her. She invited those people into her life and into her home. And a little bit later in the chapter, you'll see that Paul and Silas, as they're walking about, they throw a demon out of, or they throw a demon, but they speak the word of a demon out of a slave girl, and they get thrown into prison. And as soon as they're released from prison, they say, okay, let's go back to Lydia's. Because that became the first church. Because those hearts knew that their hearts were made for Jesus. And when our hearts are hungry, they can be fed by the bread of life. When we're thirsty, we can drink water from a living water that never ends. And that water and that bread transform our lives, our hearts. We're transformed by his love and his grace. And that impact of just flowing into us flows out wherever we are, into our everyday lives. Whether it's seeing someone who is crying at work and offering to pray for them. Not just for them, but saying, can I pray with you right now? Or what about offering to care for the little ones of a single mom, just so she could have maybe a couple hours alone? What about offering to drive someone to the doctor because they can't? Or maybe just to be a friend, to be with them on the way and on the way back. How can we show his love to others in such a way that their hungry hearts will be fed? And so how is your overflowing love for Christ being displayed in your life? You know, as you leave here today, think about that. Think about how your heart was transformed and how hungry you were and how God opened your heart and he fed the exact hunger that you needed. And are you willing to be obedient to be his servant? To speak words into other people's lives, to show action into other people's lives. Because really it is just a heart thing. And so where is your heart? If you could join me in prayer. Lord, I thank you. I thank you that you gave us. You gave us hearts to receive. And I thank you that your heart is so large and so big that it just overflows for your love for us. Lord, I pray that each and every person in here continues to hunger for you. Lord, that our hearts are just wanting more and more of you, Lord, and that we are willing to hear, to feel, to touch, whatever it is that you're trying to tell us. Lord, I pray that you would come into our hearts and transform us, and by your grace and by your love, that we will be obedient. We will be obedient to come alongside of others and to tell them of your transforming love, to show your transforming love. Lord, I thank you for this beautiful day. I thank you for the mothers that are here today. I thank you for those who step in and are mothers to those whose mothers aren't there. Lord, I thank you for your grace, for your mercy, and your love. In Jesus' name, amen. Lord, thank you for giving us Jesus. Just pray that you would be with each and every person as they walk out this week. Lord, let your words speak to them and let their hearts be obedient to you. In Jesus' name. Before you leave, if you could talk to one person here and tell them how God spoke to your heart through this message. Is there something that you're going to do next week specifically that you can tell someone before you leave today? May His grace and peace be with you.